gauges of the ship so that the ship won't capsize because of the great storm. And at the end of the day, the captain of the ship went to the lower deck and found Jonah sleeping and said, ìwọ ọmọkùnrin yìí ó lọ sùn bí táwọn ti fẹ́ parun, go up and start calling your God, just like others have been calling their gods, so that this storm will cease. Then Jonah left where he was and went to join others at the upper deck. They all called on their gods. And I'm sure Jonah also did the same thing, but there was no response. Not until when somebody now said, wait, let us cast lots to know who the problem is. So when they now did the lot casting, the lot fell on Jonah. But don't forget, they already called on their gods. Jonah was also included in that equation. He also called on his God, but he knew he was the problem. Not until when somebody said, let us cast lots. So they did the lot casting. The lot fell on Job. Then all of them now came together and said, this man, what have you done? Why have you brought this upon us? So Jonah now said, the only solution is for them to throw him into the ocean. I'm not quoting the verses word for word. I'm just paraphrasing, telling the story. If I've said anything contrary to what is written in Jonah chapter 1 from verses 1 to 7, anybody can fault me on that. Then we'll discuss further. So now, Jonah now said the only solution is for them to throw him into the sea, that the storm will cease. And before those men threw Jonah into the ocean, they begged for forgiveness, from God. And they all said, it is what he has said they should do to him that they have done, that, this should not be counted as sin upon them. So they now threw Jonah into the ocean. That was when, the so-called big whale or fish, or what do they even call it, swallowed Jonah, and the storm stopped. Now, my question at that point is, this Lord casting of a thing, after they have all called on their gods, including Jonah, because he was part of them when they were calling on their gods, they didn't get any response, not until they did the Lord casting. Now, fast forward to New Testament. This is just the elementary part of Lord casting. There are more complicated and comprehensive chapters and verses in the Bible that we can also make reference to. But let me fast forward to the New Testament. The book of Acts, chapter 1, if you read it from verse 23 to 26, you will see the situation where the disciples wanted to replace Judas Iscariot. They wanted to choose between Barsabbas and Matthias. After they had fasted and prayed, if you read it from verse 24 to 26, they fasted and they prayed. And we were taught while growing up, during our formative years, that, fasting and prayer solves all problems. But the disciples in the Bible fasted and they prayed and got no response, not until when they did the Lord casting. It was then they knew they were supposed to choose Matthias. How come they didn't know, after praying, that Matthias was to be selected to replace Judas Iscariot? How come they didn't know that Matthias was to be selected after they had fasted? But they only got to know they were supposed to select Matthias after they did the Lord casting. Then what is this same Lord casting? When I did my extensive research, I got to realize that should I call it a device or a contraption that they use to cast lots in the medieval days, even in the Old Testament and even in the New Testament, it's no different from what our Babalawos use in Nigeria. That okpele that they cast into the lab. You see Babalawos, they will sit down and spread their legs and, flip the okpele. That is exactly what it is. And back in the days, they call it Urim and Thummim. Urim and Thummim. Urim, that's 1, Thummim 2. That's like 1 and 2. Like they do in Ifa, but you can Ifa, Oju konju meji, So Kusiya Tombe. So now, how come that practice stopped? But Babalawo won't condemn it because they didn't understand it. And most times, when you don't understand something, condemnation is inevitable. You just begin to condemn it. You just begin to condemn it because they don't understand it. So what is now the difference between Lord casting that our Babalawos did and Lord casting that was in the New Testament? As a matter of fact, it was done a couple of times in the Old Testament more than in the New Testament. But there was no mention of where it was stated that, oh, Lord casting has been abolished. So how come Christianity nowadays is now making us weak by telling us to shun all these practices? But it was done so many times in the Bible, both in the Old Testament and the New Testament. Even when David, somewhere in the Old Testament too, David never used to cast lot because he wasn't a priest. If he wasn't a priest, but David would use the effort to inquire from the Lord. Whenever David wants to make a decision, he uses the effort, so to speak. He will use the effort to make inquiries from the Lord. While the priest would cast lots, David will use the effort to make inquiries from the Lord. This is the same David that wrote the entire book of Psalms, that knows how to pray, that knows, this is the man after God's heart. The man after God's heart will still use an effort to make inquiries from the Lord. There's something wrong somewhere. There is something wrong somewhere. And if anybody sees the big picture like I see it, it's like they just brought this Bible for us, to do away with our spirituality, which is the source of our strength, then to make us weak, for us to be colonized. That's exactly how I see it. I'm going to yield my mic for now because I don't want to speak too long. Anybody, but one or two comments.
Yeah, thank you so much,
You're
Bishop
welcome.
Andrew. Thank you very much, Bishop Andrew. I just wanted to say something before we continue on the show. We're all matured people here. We're all educated. I just want to say that the reason that we're having the show is so that we can learn, and we can only learn when we're not all speaking at the same time, when we respect ourselves and we let somebody finish talking. So, and that's why, like, I'm hosting the show to make sure that everything goes, the way it should go. So please, everybody's going to get a chance to talk. When someone is talking, please don't talk over them. That way we can hear that person. And then, if, as you guys know, our speaker today is Bishop Andrew. So it will be the one doing most of the talking. I'm just going to be, kind of like helping out here and there. So please, if we do that, the show will be more enjoyable and we'll be able to learn. So thank you very much, Bishop Andrew, for that wonderful opening, explaining to the people what our topic is today. Emma Bino, Motuti changes English. Topic wale ni divination, and divination ó dàbí ifá. Téèyàn bá ṣe ifá, òun náà ni divination jẹ́. A dẹ̀ fẹ́ wò pé ó wà nínú Bíbélì, ó wà nínú Old Testament wọn, ó wà nínú New Testament wọn. Wọ́n dẹ̀ sọ fáwa pé ifá ò dá, wọ́n ní káwa sọ títí wa nù. Ṣùgbọ́n nínú Bíbélì wọn, wọ́n ní nǹkan, because every nation, tẹ́ bá lọ wo China, tẹ́ bá wo India, tẹ́ bá wo Tanzania, tẹ́ bá wo Ghana, tẹ́ bá wo àwọn Igbo gan títí wọ́n jẹ́ Alpha. Every nation ló ní divination system wọn. Kò sí any nation tó lè sọ pé, kò sẹ́ni ọ̀kan tó lè sọ pé àwọn làwọn gbé ifá fáwa. Kò sẹ́ni tó lè sọ pé àwọn làwọn gbé Alpha fún Igbo. Kò sẹ́ni tó lè sọ pé àwọn làwọn gbé yin and yang fún China. Olódùmarè is already part of every nation. And that's the way that they connect to the divine. Shall understand? So, nǹkan táwa ti ní ni ó dẹ̀ sọ fáwa pé ká má lò mọ́, ní pé Jésù, òun wá ní káwa ká máa gbàdúrà sí Jésù. Òun la máa fi máa bá Yahweh sọ̀rọ̀. Àbí Jésù náà tún ní Yahweh. Àwádẹ̀ wá rí nínú Bíbélì wọn pé nínú Old Testament, divination yìí wọ́n ṣe. Lẹ́yìn ìgbà kan gbàdúrà, wọ́n sì ṣe divination yìí láti fi gbọ́ ohun Yahweh wọn. Wọ́n ṣe Old Testament, wọ́n ṣe ní New Testament. So when the Bishop wa ti bá wa sọ yẹn, he already kind of opened the floor for us. So nísìnyí, I'm going to give the floor to Prophet. I can't see the whole of your name. think Prophet MA, if you're there, sir, please help us to unmute your mic. And like I said today, let's stick on our topic.